Hi.
Hi there. Welcome back to English for Specific Purposes. We are your hosts. I'm Mr. Daryl.
And I'm Statia. მოგესალმებით, კეთილი იყოს თქვენი დაბრუნება ჩვენს ტელესკოლაში. მე თათია ვარ, ეს კი დერილია. And Mr. Daryl, what is the topic of today's lesson? Are we going to go on with law again, or is there something else for us?
Today we're moving into the mysterious world of psychology.
I'm so interested in psychology. I'm always eager to read about psychology and get some information about
That means
psychology.
You're interested in other people, the way they think, the way they plan.
Not only in other people, but also in myself. When I read about psychology, I identify very interesting things about myself too, as well as others, and how to communicate with people. I think it helps me really.
So it's very useful in both respects to meet other people, or to deal with other people and to deal with yourself.
With myself too. But Mr. Daryl, I think that before we go to the lesson, we have to look at our agenda. What's on our agenda today?
Well, we will start with an introduction, meaning a discussion for our reading text, with a vocabulary list before that. And from the reading text, we will move to the grammar. And after the grammar, we will wrap things up and give you some homework.
Very interesting. ვიდეო უშუალოდ გაკვეთილზე გადავიდოდეთ, მოდით ჩვენი გაკვეთილის გეგმას გადავხედოთ. როგორც ყოველთვის გაკვეთილი დაიწყება შესავლით, შემდეგ შევისწავლით ახალ სიტყვებს, ამას მოყვება კითხვის დავალება, შემდეგ განვიხილავთ გრამატიკას, შევაჯამებთ გაკვეთილს და დავასრულებთ საშინაო დავალებით. Okay? Let's get started, Mr. Daryl. Mr. Daryl, I want to ask you, is it difficult for you to find time to relax in the modern world?
Oh, definitely. Because I've got my cell phone all the time. I can always check emails. I can always get phone calls. I always have work to do, and it's a problem of technology in a sense.
Yeah, it is. And we never find rest, and we can never relax. And I think that a lot of people are stressed because of this technology nowadays. So we are moving faster and faster, and then we find out that we are tired of this race. And then very often we get stressed, we have depression, we have to apply to psychologists or doctors. So I think that this is the disease of the 21st century.
So because the world is moving faster, if our minds or brains do not move as fast, that's when the psychological problems start to come in.
Yeah, really. Okay, Mr. I think that we have to look at the vocabulary related to psychology. So the first word is prejudice. Prejudice is a noun, and in Georgian it is translated as stari azrim, stari წინასწარ განწყობა. Okay, Mr. Daryl, how would you define the word?
Prejudice is an unfair or unreasonable opinion or idea that you hold, that you arrived at without thinking too much about either. So you haven't really thought about the situation, you just have this reactionary feeling.
Okay, well. And what is the next word, Mr. Daryl?
It's a verb, to disguise. To disguise. To
disguise is a verb, and in Georgian it is translated as შენიღბვა. Disguise, შენიღბვა. And how would you define that word in English, Mr. Daryl?
I'd say it's when you give someone or something a new appearance in order to hide their true nature.
Yes, and sometimes people disguise themselves or their feelings in order for others not to notice.
Even to their friends.
Yeah. And here we have an example. His mask does not disguise his identity.
It's a bad mask.
Yeah, it's a bad mask. Okay, and the next word we have is
consciousness.
Consciousness is a noun, and in Georgian it is translated as ცნობიერება. So how would you define that word in English, Mr. Daryl?
Consciousness, it's the state of understanding and realizing something.
Okay, so consciousness is a noun, and in Georgian it is ცნობიერება, and here we have an example. Her consciousness that she's different makes her feel uneasy. So it means that she feels as if she's different, right?
Yeah, and maybe it's a wrong feeling, but she feels that way.
Okay. And what is the next word, Mr. Daryl?
Well, it's related. Subconscious. Subconscious.
Subconscious is an adjective, and in Georgian it is kvetsnobieri. Oh, it's a kind of mysterious word and concept. So can you define it for us, Mr. Darrow?
Yeah, now we're really getting into psychology, I guess. So it's consciousness, but subconscious, so below your level of awareness. The part of your mind that notices and remembers information, even when you are not actively trying to do so. And then that can come back later and influence the way you behave without you knowing.
Yes, you're right. And I think that psychology studies subconscious world of people, I think.
It's the most interesting thing for psychologists, maybe.
Yeah. So subconscious is an adjective, and in Georgian it means kvetsnobieri. And we have an example as usually. The memory was buried deep within my subconscious.
Maybe it was a bad memory and they buried it deep within themselves.
And the next word we have is self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem is a noun, and in Georgian it means tvitshepaseba. How would you define that word, Mr. Darrow?
It's a very good word. It's a good thing to have. Belief and confidence in yourself and your abilities.
Yes, and it's very good when you have high self-esteem, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than low self-esteem.
No.
Okay, I think that people who have low self-esteem are not very successful in life.
It's hard to be. You can't be successful if you don't believe in yourself.
Yeah. So self-esteem is a noun, and in Georgian it means tvitshepaseba. And here we have an example. She has very low self-esteem. It means that she thinks that she's not so good. Okay.
She might need to see a psychologist.
Yes, for sure. Okay. And I think that we have finished the words, and it's fun part. We have to find. We have got some sentences with gaps, and we have to find the right match. I will read it for you. Unemployment can cause feelings of inadequacy and low
self-esteem.
Self-esteem, you are right. And the next one, and I will try. Please read it for me.
Well, she couldn't something. The fact that she felt uncomfortable.
Okay, I can guess that I need a verb here. And the verb which I need here might be disguise.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
She couldn't disguise the fact that she felt uncomfortable, so she wanted to hide it, but
she couldn't.
She couldn't. Well, and the next one, you should liberate the mind from...
as we spoke about, you should be free from thoughts that you haven't thought about. Well, prejudice.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely right. Here we have prejudice. You should liberate the mind from prejudice. And 2 words and 1 sentence, an easy job. The experience helped to change her social, maybe consciousness, because we have some social consciousness, right?
It means you care about the environment, you care about people and rights and so on.
Okay. And the next one?
Nail biting is often a subconscious reaction to tension. When I was a kid, I did bite my nails.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So was there like anything kept in your subconsciousness?
I don't know. If it was buried deep.
Yeah, very deep. Okay, well, and I think that we have finished with this exercise, and it's time to move to reading part.
Yeah.
But in order to prepare for the text, we have to learn some more vocabulary, okay? And let's look at our set of vocabulary, and the first word we have on the list is behavior. Behavior is a noun, and in Georgian it is translated as ktseva. And how would you define the word in English, Mr. Darrell?
Behavior is a particular way of acting.
Okay, so some have good and some have bad behavior, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so behavior is a noun, and in Georgian it is ktseva, and here we have an example. This approach can identify common behaviors and their causes. Well, what is the next word, Mr. Darrow?
It's an adjective, and it is devastated.
Devastated is an adjective, and in Georgian it is ganadgurabuli. Oh, very sad word, isn't it? So you feel devastated when something bad happens in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
You feel very shocked, very upset.
Yes. So devastated is an adjective, and in Georgian it is ganadgurabuli. And here is the word in the example sentence. She was utterly devastated when her husband died. So usually when somebody dies around us, especially some close people to us, we are really devastated. Okay, and the next word is to admit. To admit is a verb, and in Georgian it is translated as aghiareba. Okay, how would you define that word?
Well, it's when you agree that something is true, but most especially when you don't really want to. And then kind of when you're forced to, you have to admit that something is true.
Okay, so to admit, a verb, and in Georgian it means aghiareba. And sometimes we have to admit that we are guilty. Okay, and I think that is a good thing when you admit that you are guilty, if you are guilty, rather than deny your just guilt.
That's true, unless you can escape like a bank robber or something.
Okay, yes. So to admit, and here is an example sentence, I was not entirely honest with him, I admit. Okay, and what is the next word, Mr. Darrell?
A very positive word, an adjective, trustworthy, trustworthy.
Trustworthy is an adjective, and in Georgian it means sando dobis ghirsi. So it's very good when you are trustworthy, right?
It's when you're deserving of trust. Yeah.
Okay. And here we have an example. In this job, we need someone who is entirely honest and trustworthy. Okay, so the person who we can trust, right?
Maybe an accountant.
Yeah. And we have one more word, and the word is core, and core is an adjective, and in Georgian it is mtavari ziritadi. So is the meaning of core main or major?
The most basic and most important part of a thing.
Okay. So core, adjective, and meaning is mtavari ziritadi. And here we have an example. The notion of love is one of the core values of our civilization. So such a good example, right?
Think of all the writers and poets that have written about love. So it is a core value of civilization.
Yeah. And I think that we have finished with the words. We are ready to read the text, but before we read the text, let's discuss some of the questions, okay? So today, the text we are going to read about is about identity. So let's think, when people talk about identity, what do they usually mean?
They talk about what makes you you. Tatia, for example.
What makes me me is my religion, my nationality, the place of birth, and my values. And what about you?
So all like, you listed all inner qualities, not your perhaps outward appearance.
No,
but that might be an identity as well.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you?
Same. I would have to agree. My beliefs, let's say religious beliefs, my interests as well.
Yeah.
My hobbies.
Yeah.
These things define you.
Makes you you, right? Okay. And how has your identity changed in the last few years?
Well, that's an easy question for me. I've spent the last few years in a foreign country, and so being in a foreign country, I've had to come to terms with new ways of thinking, new ways of relating to people. So my identity probably has changed
a little bit, right? Yeah. Okay. Now let's read the text. But before we read the text, we have some questions, and I want you to pay attention to the questions, and then let's read the questions and get ready to find the answers to these questions
at the end of the reading.
text. Okay. What changed in high school that changed Alfred's identity? This is the first question. Second, what are some values that Alfred writes about? Next, why was high school difficult time for Paul? And the last one, how did choosing different friends change Paul's life? So pay attention to the questions now and then listen to the text and try to memorize the answers. Let's start with the text. In next week's lecture, we'll be discussing identity. Social psychologists suggest that we have three basic types of identity. First, your given identity includes your gender, your birthplace, and your age. These are aspects of identity that are almost impossible to change. Second is your chosen identity, groups you choose to become a part of. Chosen identity can include your religion, your political beliefs, your career, or your community organizations. Finally, your core identity is what makes you unique. Your behavior, personality, values, and skills are all part of your core identity. Before Monday's lecture, post a short reply to this question. How has your identity changed in the last few years? Include reference to the three aspects of identity. So the lecturer has given the task. Let's find out what were the answers.
Okay, here's Alfred's answer. When I started high school, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I was headed. I was a star soccer player, and my entire identity was soccer. I lived it and breathed it. This was my chosen identity. Everything changed when I had a terrible knee injury during my second year. After several months, it was clear that I wouldn't be able to play soccer competitively again. I was devastated when I had to quit the team, and I was depressed. Gradually, I started to see that I was still the same person on the inside. I was still a very hard-working person, someone who didn't easily give up, and someone who loved being on a team. These were a part of my core identity. I had to rediscover my values, hard work and competition, to get through this hard time. I've been developing a new scene of identity, although I've had to change part of my chosen identity. I now understand that core identity, who I am on the inside, is the most important for me.
Okay, interesting story. Now I will read Paul's story. Like Alfred, I had a very tough time in high school. I felt like my parents didn't understand or respect me, and nothing I did was right in their eyes. They didn't think I was trustworthy, and I admit that sometimes I didn't make great choices. But my parents are part of my given identity, and therefore they are very important in my life. During high school, my chosen identity was the group of friends that I belonged to. However, some friends were influencing me in bad ways. I felt really lost and unhappy with my life. Later, when I started at the university in my city, I decided to find some new friends. I've connected with friends who better understand my family background and my values. Now I feel more comfortable around my parents because they respect me as an adult. It's important to remember that your chosen identity is not who you are. You can make other choices and change your life.
Good advice.
Okay, really good advice. And now let's see how well we remember. We said that there were some questions and we had to find answers to the questions. So the first question was the following. What changed in high school that changed Alfred's identity? What was it?
He had an injury of some kind.
Yes, you are right. We read, everything changed when I had a terrible knee injury during my second year. So knee injury changed his identity, I think, right?
Correct.
Okay, and what was the second question, Mr. Darrell?
What are some values that Alfred writes about?
Okay, I remember. He wrote about the fact that he was hardworking.
Good, yeah.
Yes, and this was his and determination, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's check and find out the exact words from the text. I was still a very hard-working person, someone who did not easily give up, and someone who loved being on a team. These were part of my core identity. I had to rediscover my values, hard work and competition, to get through these hard times. So it means that hard work and competition was his core identity. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the next question. Why was high school difficult time for Paul, Mr. Gerald? Do you remember?
Yes, I believe so. He didn't get along with his parents, and he had self-esteem issues.
Yes. He said that his parents did not respect him, and he felt like this at least. You are right, and we read, I had a very tough time in school. I felt like my parents didn't understand or respect me, and nothing I did was right in their eyes. They didn't think I was trustworthy.
Terrible childhood.
Yes, okay. And the last question, Mr. Darrell?
How did choosing different friends change Paul's life?
I think that it changed for better. So his self-esteem improved, and he thought that he was respected by parents. But let's read exactly what the text told us. I've connected with friends who better understand my family background and my values. So now I feel more comfortable around my parents because they respect me as an adult. So I could remember some passages from the text. It was nice, and I think that we have finished with the reading section and we have to move on to grammar. And the topic of grammar is reported speech again, but today we are going to study how to report questions and comments. Reported questions. Okay, can you give us some information about how to report questions?
I'd love to. We use reported questions when we want to say what someone else asked. We also use the same rules regarding tense, pronoun and time, place words, phrase changes with the reported questions as we do with reported speech.
Yes, okay, so do you remember? We talked about the changes we make when we change direct speech into indirect, into reported speech. So it was tense change. We also change
pronouns,
personal pronouns. We change expressions with place and time. Okay, so the same changes must be made in this case. Now let's look at our examples. Mike, what are you going to do? This is a direct question, and here we have it reported. Mike asked Ken what he was going to do. So as you can see, Mr. Darrell, some changes have been made. So first of all, I want to ask you, is the question given in the direct speech a WH question or yes/no question?
A WH question.
It's a WH question. It's a WH question because we have a question word in it. So we have to report WH question, right? Now, what changes have we made? Do we have the question word again in the reported question?
We do.
We do.
What?
But what has changed? Has anything changed? What about the word order? Is it the same or different?
No, the word order has changed.
Yes. So what is the order? In direct speech, first we had a verb and then the subject. Are you going to do? But when we reported the question, we have first subject and then the verb, as it is in statements. Okay. So the word order is the same as in statements. Okay. Do we use question mark anymore or no?
No, not necessary.
We don't. We should not use question mark anymore, and we do not use any inverted commas. Okay, so the next example is, Mike, are you all right, Ken? And here we reported, Mike asked Ken if he was all right. Mr. Darrell, is the first question a WH question or yes/no question?
It's a yes/no question.
It's a yes/no question, right? And now let's look at the changes we have implemented. Do we need to add anything when we report yes/no questions?
We might have to add the if.
Yes, we add if for sure. And then let's look at the order. Has the order of the words changed or no?
Yes, they have.
Yes, we have also changed the word order. After if, we have a subject and then the verb. Okay. Now, let's look at some rules we have. So, in reported WH questions, we use the following order. The WH word, the subject, and the verb. But in reported yes/no questions, we have if or whether plus the subject plus the verb. And we do not use the interrogative form of the verb, do, does, or did. As it's an indirect question, no question marks are used. Now let's look at commands and requests. Here we have, so Ken, don't spread it around Mike. Ken asked Mike not to spend it around. So we have changed command into reported speech. And in this case, we used the infinitive of the verb, okay? So the same is in the next example. Mike advised Ken, make it up with Pauline. Mike advised Ken to make it up with Pauline. So again, we use here infinitive, right? But in the first case, we have negative infinitive, and in the second case, we have positive.
Yes.
Okay. Can you add anything, Mr. Darrell?
Yeah, when we report requests, orders, advice, or warnings, we use verbs such as advice, ask, beg, tell, order, and so on, followed by an infinitive. And in the negative requests and commands, use not before to.
Okay. Well, very interesting. Now I think that we can try and do the exercise. We have questions and we have to report the questions, okay? So teacher asks, have you studied reported speech before? So how would you report this question?
The teacher asked me if I had studied reported speech before.
Okay, nice. Okay, this was a yes/no question, so you used if here. So, team, what's your core identity?
How would you answer that?
I would say, team asked me what my core identity was. Okay, so this is a WH question, so I used the same question word and then I changed the word order with subject and then the verb. And the last one.
Nick says, please don't disturb him, he doesn't feel good.
And how would you report it?
Nick asked me not to disturb him as he didn't feel good.
Okay, right. So this was a request. So you used infinitive to report the request, okay? Very nice. And I think that we have come to the end of the lesson and it's time to wrap up. So can you do it?
I'd love to. We looked at vocabulary in the beginning, as you remember. That led us into the reading on identity. And then we had a look at the grammar, reported commands and questions.
Very interesting. მოდით ახლა ჩვენი გაკვეთილი შევაჯამოთ. გაკვეთილის დასაწყისში შევისწავლეთ ახალი სიტყვები, შემდეგ წავიკითხეთ ტექსტი იდენტობაზე, შემდეგ განვიხილეთ გრამატიკა. გრამატიკის თემა იყო ირიბი თქმა. ამჯერად ვისწავლეთ როგორ გადავიყვანოთ კითხვითი და ბრძანებითი წინადადებები ირიბ თქმაში. Okay? And I think that it's time for homework. Mr. Jared, what is the homework for today?
It might be interesting for our audience. Write a paragraph on how your identity has changed in the last few years.
Very interesting topic. And where can the homework be uploaded, Mr. Jared?
It can be sent to the address on the screen.
Okay, nice. But now what we have to do is to say goodbye to the audience, to the viewers, okay? And wait for the next lesson we have, okay? So stay with us and keep on learning.
Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.